How do you balance move faster with do it responsibly?
Yeah, isn't that always the conundrum? I remember when I was a CIO, my team was all complaining that, look, we're exhausted. Things are moving so fast right now. And I'm like, yeah, it'll never move this slow again. What are we going to do? I still believe this is where we are. If you think AI is moving fast now, wait till next year.
In the world of technology, heroes are everywhere. They're overcoming disruption, delivering sustainable outcomes, and fearlessly forging the future to solve what's next. Join me, Ed McNamara, as we meet the people and businesses driving change in our constantly disruptive world. This is Innovation Heroes, a podcast brought to you by SHI. What happens when technology evolves faster than we can even imagine use cases for it? Not faster than we can build it, not faster than we can regulate it, faster than we can think about what to do with it. That's the uncomfortable reality Stacey Shulman wants us to face. And she should know. As Intel's VP overseeing health, education, and consumer industries, she's watching AI capabilities double every 6 months across sectors that directly touch human lives. That's 4 times faster than Moore's Law. And yet, she says most of us are still thinking about AI adoption in completely the wrong terms. Earlier this year, Intel and Nvidia, former rivals, announced a historic partnership. It's a $5 billion bet that the future isn't about choosing between AI infrastructure and traditional operations, but about building systems resilient enough to integrate both. And Stacey's been at the center of making that vision real. Today, on her 6th appearance on Innovation Heroes, she's here to explain why AI isn't overhyped, it's underhyped. Why our brains are wired to miss exponential trends, why we need HR systems for AI agents, and why the scariest risk isn't moving too fast, it's staying stuck in linear thinking while the world speeds up around us. Stacey, welcome back to Innovation Heroes.
Hey, thank you for having me, and great summary. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thanks to our producers, too. Stacey, this is your 6th visit to our show. As you said, you've always brought provocative perspectives, but this one might be your boldest yet. You're arguing AI isn't overhyped, it's underhyped. And that's the opposite what most skeptical IT and business leaders think right now. Walk us through your thinking about why is it underhyped?
One of the conversations I had, and it was with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who talked to me about, and the group that I was with, about the fact that humans are wired for linear thinking. We're incredibly bad at spotting exponential trends. And he also said, if you ever want to make a lot of money, go find the exponential trend and bet on it, because once it's on an exponential curve, it doesn't come off the exponential curve. And so, if you start kind of looking back at this and you think about it, is that when things are coming straight at us, you can't always tell the speed. You can't always tell, how far off in the distance. But let's say a car was coming at us and it doubled its pace every hour. Well, for the first hour, it would still seem really slow. And then the 4th hour would still seem really slow. And then, all of a sudden you would have to get out of the way. But even with those things, what happens is, because we're watching this happen for so long, and we have linear thinking, we don't see the fact that it's accelerating. And then our bias comes in of like, oh, we've been talking about this for so long that it doesn't matter. Because again, when you double small numbers, they're still small. But at some point, there's a step change. And I think AI is hitting its step change moment. There's still this notion that even though we've seen it on an exponential curve for, well over 100 years, people still believe it's going to go away any minute now. It's going to stop any minute now. And so when we look at this and we kind of take all this together, the forces around AI are not creating an environment that's harder for AI to double. It's creating an environment that's easier for AI to double. And so I have no belief that AI is going to slow down anytime soon. It's going to continue doubling.
I think the car analogy is perfect, because that is literally the deer in the headlights, like why they can't move. It's coming right at them, right? So I really like that one a lot. And in terms of, let's make this concrete for our listeners. When you say AI capabilities are doubling every 6 months, when you say it's doubling, what's the measure measurement that you're gauging that by?
I look at, one, the ability to complete tasks, the ability to complete a human task and automate a human task is doubling.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. The overall intelligence of models is doubling. That's two. And then the number of parameters in a model, which has something to do with the overall intelligence, but the overall parameters in a model is doubling. I don't think that one is as important moving forward, but the intelligence doubling and then the ability for it to complete tasks, that doubling and the length of the task, that is what's, I think, going to cause this accelerated usefulness of AI as well.
Just tying it all together, I mean, that's where we're kind of back to cavemen a bit. Like, we just can't see that. It's just too big a concept. I love that you were saying you were talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson about it, who literally is trying to explain an expanding infinite universe that allegedly keep getting bigger. Not allegedly, it really is getting bigger.
And everyone's like, oh, it'll stop growing. He's like, nope, it won't. Yeah.
Right. So a few weeks ago, Intel and Nvidia announced what's been called a historic partnership. $5 billion investment, joint development of custom chips for data centers and PCs, something that you mentioned about licensing NVIDIA GPUs in the client space while they license Intel tech for servers. This feels much more significant beyond the money. What's the story here, and what's your take?
Well, I can't speak officially for what the Intel and NVIDIA story is, but I can tell you my take on it. My take is that, that ties into AI speed. The fact is that a single company can't go alone anymore in this area. It's moving too fast. And those companies who believe that they can be the lone wolf in this game will find out, I think, very quickly that they're wrong. That's one. Two, I believe wholeheartedly that you can't have parallel universes with AI. You can't have your AI infrastructure and your AI stuff and then your operational stuff. Those things must converge. And so when you look at the partnership between NVIDIA and Intel, that's kind of the storyline, right? Is that you can't have an NVIDIA infrastructure and an Intel infrastructure, in my opinion, and have those worlds and not collide at some point. They have to converge. Pretty delighted that we're creating an ecosystem for all of our partners that allows them to move faster.
I love what you said about a single company can't go it alone, because when I was reading about this, I was thinking about, the big joint ventures in history aimed at achieving something, momentous. I think like moon landing. I think like World War II, like these huge shifts in historically, and how it's been, like companies who are partnering and like governments who are, public-private like joint ventures and things like that. And like, is it kind of that big? It's not like, okay, first person to land on the moon. Everybody can visualize that. That's an actual, like we've always had first person to do this, first person to do that. But like it feels that big to me. I don't know. Is that an overstatement?
I don't think that it is insignificant. I think that we are at that moment where we'll look back and go, that was absolutely a pivotal moment in compute's history. We've had a number of these, kind of like when, the iPhone moment or, the internet search moment. I think we're seeing this, and we're seeing, and even speaking of those industries, like search is changing forever. It's changed forever. It's changed forever. We won't search the same now that we have things like Claude and ChatGPT and others. Like we just aren't going to continue searching the way that we used to.
Yeah, and I know that because as part of a marketing department, I get pitched on, GEO optimization now, and I'm like, do you really know? Like, do you?
Yeah, you're like, wait, you guys need to get on board with this. Yeah.
Yeah, like we just got started on this, and now I have all these experts who are, there to sell me a service on it. But you mentioned something in our pre-call about how organizations need to stop thinking about building AI infrastructure and start thinking about building resilient infrastructure. Can you talk about the difference between those two?
I think they're the same, but I would say there's a nuance, and that is it's not practical for a company to go and rip and replace their entire infrastructure to get ready for the future. Mm-hmm. You have to adapt. Of course, you've got to inject AI into those things. You've got to put an infrastructure together that allows you to plug pull out one piece and plug in a new one as you need to. So I think resiliency is that. It's being able to take what you have and in the moment update only what you need when you need it versus trying to kind of pull everything out and replace all of it. And it just who can afford that? Like, it's not practical.
Speaking of spend and speaking of costs, you talked about treating AI agents like employees, right? You have a really fascinating framework here. You're arguing that organizations need to think about AI agents not as tools, but as actual employees. And you're quite literal about this. You want HR systems for agents. Can you explain what you mean about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we start looking at agents, especially if we go back to that doubling rate, right? The ability of an agent to be able to do a task and the length of task is now increasing and doubling every, we'll say 6 to 7 months.
Hmm.
So let's say, a year from now, you now have the ability to start onboarding interns that work for the cost of electricity. So those interns, what can they do? Well, probably about as much as any intern can do. And you can't just dump them in there and expect them to perform, right? You've
Right.
got to train them. You've got to tell them what's important to you. You've got to have them read your company manual. You've got to, you send them through an amount of training. Um, and the amount of training that you send your interns through determines the ability for them to be successful. When you look at it and you say, okay, what access do you need to be able to complete this task? You have to ask those questions. And how much can I trust you to access this other sensitive information? Those are also good questions to ask. So I think if we put it into that framework, we start thinking through it in the right way with agents. Is, one, we have to have a manager for these that grades and assesses their effectiveness, just like interns. And our expectation should be that those interns get better and they grow and they become more mature and that they do their tasks more efficiently. That should be our same expectation for agents that we put in. The other thing is that for interns to grow and thrive in a company, they need collaboration with people who are more experienced. Agents do too.
Right.
They're going to need for people who are experienced to teach them what needs to be done, give them feedback, and they're also going to need interaction with other more mature agents that can feed them context and tell them where they're going wrong. And so as we start thinking about these types of infrastructures, I think it creates the right behaviors and how we can think through how to quickly onboard these new agents. And just like a bad intern, sometimes you're going to have a bad agent and you're going to have to, fire it, frankly, um, and replace it with a better agent. So I think if we start thinking of it that way, it helps.
There's a real kind of quality of life for those managers too, because sometimes, as you said, firing an intern, but I've also seen managers who are really bad at managing interns, right? Like, and not really comprehending like what that intern needs or what they respond to, because they're not in that point in their career, and for whatever reason, like they've kind of moved on, and either the intern is doing nothing for a while, or doing things that they should have never been tasked with, and it's a fine line. So I could see it helping managers like actually manage the intern better, regardless of who it is.
Agreed. And it also is, all those same issues that you talked about with managers managing interns, we have in the
Mhm.
AI space as well. If you put an agent in and you just let it run with no feedback, it's going to be like a bad employee. Maybe you get lucky. Maybe you just get lucky and you find one
Right.
that didn't need a lot of feedback. It happens, right? Even with employees, but most of the time you're not going to get lucky, and they're going to be a product of what you invested into them. And I think it's the same for agents. But it also is going to require that managers learn how to ask the right questions and know how to feed the right context into that virtual employee.
So if I'm a CIO listening to this, what's step one? Do I actually loop in my HR department, and how's that going to go?
I think you do. I think you loop in your HR department and say, if we were going to onboard 1,000 new employees, what would we need them to know? What would we teach them? What training? What's important? What manuals would we give them? And I think that answer needs to go into your next training model.
So in terms of adoption, you travel globally and you see AI adoption across education, healthcare, retail. Where are you seeing the most interesting movement right now? And also where are organizations getting stuck?
I've seen movement in all of those places. And my bias is going to come out. And because I am really excited about what's going on in the education space. We've talked about personalized education for so long, as an industry about the benefits of personalizing education. I don't think we've talked enough about the benefits of providing the right tools for the educator to be able to do that, right? And
Mm,
so the way that we always leave those conversations on personalized education is, here's a website, kid, go figure it out. And maybe
mm,
you have a mentor or somebody on the side that is helping you, assuming your parents are wealthy enough to pay for that. And
right.
so now I think with these new tools, the conversation changes to giving the right tools to the educator to understand how to spot kids that learn different, and then how to adjust in real time teaching styles for those children, and then also can be a virtual coach, a virtual teaching coach to that student in real time while they're in the classroom. So imagine now every student has a personal tutor sitting right next to them in the class, helping them in real time with no judgment, no shame on exactly how they should think about the content they just learned from the instructor. So now the instructor has, a personal assistant or a personal tutor sitting at every seat with every student.
Mhm.
And the student has a way to confide in that tutor to understand the content differently.
From an education standpoint, being the son of two teachers, they always say the hardest thing for new teachers is classroom management, right? And with like the constant engagement of like AI, that really is going to help with that because there's smart kids who get into trouble because they're bored, or right, or they,
Yeah.
there's a teacher who is a 1 to 30 student, teacher to student ratio, and it feels like this can really help with like the most basic of like new teachers and classroom management and the issues that they deal with. And you were going to talk about healthcare, and I know from previous conversations with you, it's probably going to deal with the nurses who are at the tip of the spear, right?
Look, I think nurses run the world. So
Me too.
teachers and nurses, you run the world. We all understand this. But I think that when you look in the healthcare space, you also see this need for clinicians, doctors,
Mm,
nurses, everybody involved. When you ask everybody, what they want is they want more quality time with their patient. That's what they want.
mm,
When we start looking at how do you give them more quality time, you remove the administrative things. Um, right now, a doctor spends more time heads down typing on their computer than they do eye to eye with the patient. And that they don't
mm.
want, the patient doesn't want, nobody wants that. But imagine if they can just have a conversation and their virtual assistants listening in the background and capturing the important things, summarizing that, and then giving the doctor the summary at the end of the conversation that they can say, oh, yeah, I think you caught it right, or no, this was important, or, here's some observations that I had that I want to add into the conversation. So now that doctor's time is spent, very little time actually eyes on the keyboard and much more time eyes on the patient.
Absolutely. Asking one of the hard questions, you're pushing organizations to move faster, adopt more broadly, um, you know, treat AI as understated rather than overstated. But there's a lot of IT leaders who still are have concerns about security and hallucinations, liability, governance, things like that. How do you balance move faster with do it responsibly?
Yeah, isn't that always the conundrum, right? Back when we were, when I was a CIO, my team was all complaining that, look, we're exhausted. Things are
Mm,
moving so fast right now. And I'm like, yeah, it'll never move this slow again. What are we going to do to adapt? And I still believe this is where we are. If you think AI is moving fast now, wait till next year. I would say, how do you balance it? I bias towards, if you can't move fast and safe, you balance to safety, right?
right.
You bias to safety. Uh, and depends on, your risk profile and what kind of sensitive data you're sitting on. So I don't have a one-size-fits-all answer to this. All I have is empathy for the people who have to wrestle with it right now.
I love when one of our guests actually writes the subheading on the episode title. And when you said "We'll never move this slow again," I thought, oh, we just wrote the subtitle to this. It's fantastic. So you've talked about Gene Roddenberry, his vision in Star Trek. Showed us an optimistic, abundant future powered by technology. Some of today's narratives are dominated by kind of the Black Mirror dystopia. Why does that distinction matter? Why was it so optimistic, and now why are we so seemingly, at least in the fictionalized world, so terrified?
Well, I think that it's a nod to how important sci-fi writers are to us as a society.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I'm a big fan of the Roddenberry family. I've known Rod Roddenberry for a while, and Heidi Roddenberry, who runs the Roddenberry Foundation. It's just a spectacular family, like in general, and I think they well represent what Gene was doing, in his vision, which was always optimistic. It was always like an optimistic, abundant view of the future. It was always trying to encourage people to explore and experiment, and it was always with a lens of inclusivity without it being kind of shoved down your throat. He painted a vision of how you could improve humanity with technology. And so that I think is really important. I think that caution and things like Black Mirror that give us the dystopic view and give us a warning sign are also important, but there has to be balance. And I just think we're right now so over biased towards fear that we don't see the opportunity there. And so I would love for sci-fi writers to step into those big shoes that, and the void that was left when Gene Roddenberry stopped working on Star Trek, and find a way to be that optimistic about the future again.
That's a fantastic point, which will bring us back full circle to something tactical. For the IT leader listening, who's convinced with the argument, saying we'll never move this slow again. How do they prepare their organization? Where do they start on Monday? And I suspect like everybody's in a different place, but generally, how do they get started?
I think most IT leaders have started. I would I believe a lot of them have started, because they've been on this journey for a long time of improvement. Making sure that their infrastructure is right, that their policies are right. And I think that one is, I always like to tell people, start with your business improvement plan, and then look at how you can leverage modern technology and modern tools into that business improvement plan. Now, one of the modern tools and technologies you have is AI. It's growing fast. And so how do we go through and look at everything that we're doing and ask the question of where does AI fit? And where does it not fit? Because there are some places that it just doesn't fit right now. But in every business improvement objective, every key strategy, if you're not asking the question of where does AI fit into this, I think you're missing out on optimizing that strategy.
So it's prediction time. And don't worry, we never hold anybody to their predictions or go back and check them years later. So, but knowing about, the 6-month doubling rate that we talked about before, and how our brains are so bad at predicting, exponentials, what's one capability or application you think will emerge in the next 12 to 24 months that most people aren't preparing for? Or at least you probably know a bunch of them, but like, what's your favorite that's like, yeah, of course, this is what's going to happen, but nobody's preparing for it right now?
I think that, the ability to create agents that are part of your working team, right? So when you have a Teams chat, or when you have a virtual meeting with your organization, do you have a virtual marketing person in that conversation contributing? Do you have a virtual attorney in telling you where your risks are And you can adjust that attorney to where, you're risk averse, you're not as risk averse, you're going to weigh, or you have an agent that is intended to be the contrarian in the conversation to help with creative ideas. I think most of us have one of those on our team anyways, but having an agent whose role it is to really push the boundaries on the ideas and concepts, I think that's something that I would encourage people to start doing is in putting agents into the conversation, and they're ready for it now. So there's lots of them out there. There's a lot of ability to do this safely, and that's one thing that I think we're going to start seeing more of.
How far away are we from an employee actually having an incident involving HR interaction between an agent and an actual employee?
It's probably already happened, quite frankly. Like, I think we've already there. Like, again, these virtual interns are only as good as the training that is provided to them. And if they're trained by somebody who has HR issues, they may also have HR issues.
It's like, you wanted us to be human, so here we are.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. It's a personal one. You've been in technology for 3 decades. Retail CIO, and now leading AI strategy at Intel across healthcare, education, and consumer sectors. What is it about this moment specifically that keeps you energized, and what do you care so much about getting this right?
I've thought a lot about this. I'm somebody who likes new things. I like new toys. So this moment is exciting because there's a lot of new. And it's kind of one of those moments where I actually think it's more significant than the internet moment, where, we all were like, what's possible? The art of the possible was out there, and we were just dreamers thinking about what can we do. Some people made quite a good amount of money on it. Some of us, weren't as big of dreamers.
Right.
But I think in this moment, it's that again, but amplified. I mean, what's possible? I don't need to be good at writing code to be able to create a product now. I have to be good at communicating what I want. And so for those people who are, creative and brilliant and, didn't have the right partner there to balance out what they were trying to do, now you have a bank of partners that you can pull from in AI. And, if you look at what's happening with vibe coding and the acceleration of vibe coding, that's not going to slow down. And I'm not saying developers' jobs are going away, but, if you can vibe code something faster than you can get an intern to do it, it's going to be really hard for new grads to get jobs, just simply writing code. Right. And they're going to have to do more now. And so this time to me it's an acceleration of tools for creatives. And I think we're going to see a creative explosion out of it. That's why I'm excited.
Well, communications majors like me are rejoicing everywhere. Yes, the exact opposite of what they told us years ago, but I'll take it. Stacey's central insight is this: we're not preparing for AI the way we think we are. We're building AI infrastructure when we should be building resilient infrastructure. We're debating whether AI is overhyped when we should be scrambling to keep up with technology that's improving 4 times faster than anything in computing history. And we're thinking about AI as a tool when we should be thinking about it as a workforce, one that needs onboarding, training, management, and collaboration systems. What Stacey is describing, this need for resilient, integrated, rapidly adaptable infrastructure, is exactly what SHI has been building towards, whether it's in our AI and cyber labs in New Jersey, where you can prototype and test before you commit, or the partnerships that bring best-in-class technology together without forcing you to rip and replace your existing operations. SHI is helping organizations build that kind of flexibility that Stacey's talking about. Because the question isn't whether AI will transform your business, it's whether you'll be ready when it does. Thanks for listening to Innovation Heroes. Learn more about SHI's AI infrastructures and solutions at shi.com/AI, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next conversation. Stacey, thank you so much for joining us again here today. It's always a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.